A year ago, I had never worn a pair of these goggles. Now, they are a symbol of my motivation. They are how I experience perspectives I could only imagine as a child, and are inspiring me to achieve my goals as an adult. To me, they have become an indispensable tool. My name is John Hart, and this is how drones changed my life. As far back as I can remember, I have been fascinated with the idea of flight. As a young child, I watched with wonder while the winged were apparently free from gravity to play in the sky, and I often found myself longing to see our world as they did. By the time I was in school, flight was a noticeable interest of mine. I had been reading books about aviation, gotten into building model planes, went to several air shows, and even received my first autograph from a B-2 pilot. As a teen, I was pretty heavy into gaming. I played every genre, but flight sims were my favorite. Though I was enamored by the freedom of flight in these games, I was also spurned by the limitations of the technology at the time. Despite my obvious interests, I never actually pursued aviation. As I grew older, my interest remained just an interest, and with it, my feet remained on the ground. When the wonder and innocence of youth turned into the wanderlust and restlessness of young adulthood, I went in search of adventure. My curiosities whisked me into a world of security logistics, shadowy figures, powerful romances, transitive jobs, and soulful tragedy that spit me out 15 years later with a head full of self-doubt and little to no direction in life other than a fading desire to live. I was nearing the bottom of a long fall. My fiancée and I broke up, ending a 6-year relationship. As a result, I had lost my home, and I ended up in a friend's basement with no bed or proper furniture to speak of. My job as an arms dealer was more dangerous and stressful than satisfying or lucrative, and every day I met another person who chipped away at my faith in humanity. My social life had taken several blows, along with the inevitable losses of messy breakups. My list of friends had also been getting smaller as my choices became more reckless. Without the motivation or interest to take care of myself, I ended up smoking, drinking, and trashing my body, keeping myself sedated in my off time, and eating junk food or relying on energy drinks to keep me fueled for work, which I was only doing to pay for the things I used to keep myself complacent and alive, living just so I could continue to work without thinking about my situation. It was a terrible cycle, and it was destroying me. Then something happened. A struggle began in my mind, which combined with a bit of serendipity. I didn't know how, but I knew I needed to feel happy about my life again. I started making more time for my friends and began searching for enjoyment in the places where I had found it before. However, more often than not, what I had found was myself in states of great stress or near crippling anxiety. I felt disturbingly out of place where I had once felt welcome, and uncomfortable with people whom in the past could offer me solace and peace with a simple smile. Though I wasn't finding what I was looking for, I was beginning to understand why I was so unhappy. I didn't know how to be happy alone. For a majority of the last 10 years, I had been half of a couple, part of a duo, or a partner to someone for whom I lived. I had become too dependent on having another person to motivate me, and I had forgotten how to be happy without the approval of a partner. So I decided to seek out some of the things I had always wanted to do but seemed out of reach for one reason or another. That is when I saw an opportunity to combine my childhood fantasy of flight with my love of photography and filmography: drones. However, most platforms were out of my price range, so I moved on with my quest. Shortly after, I found myself with Kyader at our local state fair, playing carnival games on the Midway. I had been having a good run of the games that night, and I decided to try my luck at the shooting gallery. After some observation, a few tries, and a vote of confidence from Kyader, I managed to shoot out that little red star with the sketchiest pellet gun I had ever held, and the fates gifted upon me my first quadcopter, a Cyma X5 HW. It is worth noting that this was not a sporty quad by any stretch of the imagination, nor was it even a proper FPV setup. The video link was via Wi-Fi to a phone or tablet, and the acro mode was actually just a button that upon pressing would initiate a single flip, which led to more crashing than actual stunts. My first flight could have gone a little more smoothly. However, I was determined, and I knew the sky was not the limit. It was just the beginning. After nearly losing the thing a few times, getting it eaten by some trees, and making a couple modifications, I began to get used to flying. Sorta. By this point, I was hooked though. I thought I might get a DJI Mavic next, but something made me seek out other platforms. This is when I discovered YouTube channels like Roto Riot, UAV Futures, and Flight Test, which led me to other pilots, their videos, and the world of FPV mini-quads. Mini-quads were a completely new concept for me, but as I watched dozens of pilots fly in a way that looked so freeing while sharing their unique perspective on film, I found so much inspiration seeing how they told their stories. And I knew I was watching something that I wanted to do myself. Then, I realized what I was feeling. For the first time in a long time, I had a real goal, and I wanted it for myself. That goal kept me on track to buy my first set of gear last January, which has allowed me to stay in the air for the most part. Now, having started my journey in FPV less than a year ago, I have gone from not being sure what binding means to having a preferred PID tune. I've learned immensely from our extremely helpful community, endured a fair amount of trial and error, made several notable life improvements, walked out of my career as an arms dealer, started filming 2 series about FPV, experienced more than a fair amount of crashing both in the air and on the ground, and so much more which I can only explain by showing. I know that I still have a difficult road ahead of me, but now the motivation to don the goggles and fly another day keeps me working toward my goals of a life where I can inspire others. From my first flight to the unforeseeable horizons it leads to, join me on a search for the unique perspectives once thought only imaginable, which FPV has opened to us.